never laugh as a hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in bloody sheets to drop you 6 feet underneath. They put you in a pine wood box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. It all goes well for about a week, and then your coffin begins to leak, and the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose as you begin to decompose. A slimy beetle with demon's eyes chews through your stomach and out your sides. Your stomach turns to rancid grease, and pus pours out like melted cheese. You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you'll eat when you're dead. And the worms crawl out, the worms crawl in, the worms that crawl in are lean and thin, the ones that crawl out are fat and stout. Your eyes fall in and your hair falls out. Your brain turns into maggot pie, your liver starts to liquefy, and for the living all is well as you sink further into hell. And the flames rise up to drag you down into the fire where you will drown. Your skin melts off as you descend, and Satan tears you limb from limb. Your suffering will never end. And the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They'll eat your guts and then shit them out. And when your bones begin to rot, the worms remain, but you do not. So don't ever laugh as a hearse goes by, for someday you'll be the one to die. And when death brings his cold despair, ask yourself, will anyone care? Don't ever laugh as a hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in bloody sheets to drop you 6 feet underneath. They put you in a pine wood box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. It all goes well for about a week, and then your coffin begins to leak, and the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose as you begin to decompose. A slimy beetle with demon's eyes chews through your stomach and out your sides. Your stomach turns to rancid grease, and pus pours out like melted cheese. You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you'll eat when you're dead. And the worms crawl out, the worms crawl in, the worms that crawl in are lean and thin, the ones that crawl out are fat and stout. Your eyes fall in and your hair falls out. Your brain turns into maggot pie, your liver starts to liquefy, and for the living all is well as you sink further into hell. And the flames rise up to drag you down into the fire where you will drown. Your skin melts off as you descend, and Satan tears you limb from limb. Your suffering will never end. And the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They'll eat your guts and then shit them out. And when your bones begin to rot, the worms remain, but you do not. So don't ever laugh as a hearse goes by, for someday you'll be the one to die. And when death brings his cold despair, ask yourself,
What is going on, everybody? See who all we got in there. We see we got Devin, Alessandro, the Vibe Check God. Welcome back. What's going on, Dave? What's going on, Dead Corpse number 5? How you doing? What's going on, Nick?
Don't ever
What else we got? What else we got?
Goes by for you.
Nice little group that we got going on so far.
They wrap you up in bloody sheets to drop you 6 feet.
So today, we will be talking some more Friday the 13th. Not much, Dead Corpse. Not much. How is everything with you? How are you doing on this day? Excuse me. What's going on, T-Rex? Oh, no worries. Just nice to have you drop by, say hello. Hello back. Take care of what you gotta take care of, and get you in the next one, my friend. Choose through your stomach and out your side. Your stomach turns rancid grease and pus pours out like melted cheese. You spread it on. Dead Corpse number 5 says, do you know how Jason's face became wrinkly in part 4? Well, technically it was kind of wrinkly even in part 3, depending on how you look at his facial expressions. But I think you're kind of meaning how, like, it stays like that. Like, it's almost like static, like, where it's just, like, stuck like that. There is a theory that I have with it, like, once he got the axe to the head, that it may have caused some kind of neurological effect. And possibly he might even stroked out at that point. Which, with some strokes, you can maintain a certain facial expression. Which is why when Jason turns around, we see him stuck in that facial expression. Like, he doesn't really move from that expression itself. It could be after he got the axe to the head, maybe stroked out while he was laying down in the barn. That could have been one of the injuries that he suffered. Or maybe that's why he collapsed overall when dealing with Chris. Maybe he did have a stroke. And ultimately, that kind of froze his face, at least on that one side, in place. That would be sort of my thing of why I think that may have happened, but I could be wrong. So I could make it to the stream as it's not 3 a.m. Well, that's good. That's good. That's good. Glad to have you, Dick. Glad to have you. What's going on, Machete? How are you doing as well? But yeah, like, when you look at Jason in part 3, when he's doing, especially in certain stills, when they had the original ending, when he was cutting off Chris's head, if you look at his face, he's like, mouth is open, or even when he bursts through the door, he does have moments where his face is kind of wrinkly. It's not as wrinkly as it is in part 4, granted. And he does have some teeth protrusions in part 4. But I think ultimately he probably suffered a stroke that was given to him after the axe wound. That's what I would kind of think kind of created it, because it almost accentuates the overall expression. Sort of what they call rictus grin. I think that's how you say it. Where it's sort of what they base the Joker toxin off of in the comics, where people die with the smile on their face. It's kind of the same thing, like, could possibly happen with that, like, because of the stroke that he suffered. It created sort of a muscular kind of effect that pulled his skin back into that kind of that expression, which is why he kind of looks like he's smiling in some scenes in part 4. But I mean, that's how I would kind of look at it. The teeth protrusions, I'm not entirely certain how we would explain that, since he didn't have that in part 3 or even part 2. But I mean, if we're going by the theory that part 2 is a dream and it's based off the quick glance that Jenny has of Jason laying on his side, she wouldn't know what his teeth look like. So I mean, that would kind of be all mental. But in part 4, with that, like, those teeth like sticking out, I mean, maybe he could have been hiding those in there in part 3, and because he didn't stroke out yet, that maybe you couldn't see him. maybe. And then after the stroke, it's like pretty much his mouth is a little bit more gaped open, or maybe he suffered an injury that caused the teeth to sort of point outwards on the one side. That's a possibility. Because, I mean, maybe if he gritted his teeth and it started... I mean, there's multiple ways you could look at it with that. Wish they would have kept the original ending for part 3. I mean, I wouldn't have minded it. I personally wouldn't have minded it. I think doing the dream sequence with Pamela at the end, coming out of the lake, did throw a lot of people off. And for me, especially when I saw it, because I was even theorizing back then, which was like, where were they going with it? I mean, we see Pamela's head. What was it, at the beginning of part 3, and then we see also see it at the end of part 2, and then we get a glimpse of Pamela coming out of the lake, head reattached and all, worms and all that shit, attacking Chris, and it kind of felt like they were leading us somewhere with Pamela. That's what it kind of felt like. And after part 3, it was just never really revisited. I mean, outside of Pamela's grave, that was really it. I mean, of course, we got part 8 where what's his name on the boat talks to his girlfriend Susie and fucking mentions Pamela. But I don't think we really get a mention of Pamela after part 4, and that's just because of the tombstone. I mean, in the Paramount films. Of course, in the New Line films, we have a mention of Pamela in Jason Goes to Hell. We have a mention in visual of the Freddy Krueger version of Pamela in Freddy vs. Jason. And then we get Pamela in the remake, reboot, / whatever. I'm not sure yet, Machete. I would have to look at my schedule, see where I can fit in, and see what I can try to do with it. I haven't looked at my schedule yet. Like I said, I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be fun to do, especially because I got to look up as far as what software that I might need to actually make this happen officially, like professionally, and so forth. Because I don't want to just like hop on comms and have shit cut out in the middle of it. It's something I kind of want to be prepared for, especially not just with you, but with other people in the future as well. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. Also wanted to break down what David Green said during the watch party. I saw that he said about revisiting the Myers house. But I unfortunately didn't catch most of the watch party. I caught some of it, but I didn't catch most of it. But enlighten me. What did he say? Let me see if our if you may already know what I've heard. The Chris attack at the end of part 3 didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense in the context that as far as we don't know what's going on. If you look at it from a broader perspective and think of it the way we look at Tina Shepard, where everyone that seemingly comes in contact with Crystal Lake all has these visions. We have Alice in part 1 that has the visions of Jason coming out of the lake, kid Jason coming out of the lake. Now, on its face, we can think of that as, well, Jason came out of the lake, attacked her because she killed his mother. Okay, yeah, that on its face kind of makes sense. But if we look at it from a broader perspective, we know that not to be the case because Jason 2 months later grew into adulthood to kill Alice. So it doesn't make any sense. What it could mean is the reemergence of Jason. Like Jason coming out of the lake is reemerging. And Alice had this almost prophetic kind of vision that Jason was reemerging because of her killing Pamela. Now, the same thing with Jenny, where pretty much Jenny at the end, we see the dream sequence with Jason once again, could also mean that pretty much he's having a prophetic dream that Jason's not dead, Jason's terror is going to continue on. And then part 3, we look at it from a prophetic stance that maybe Chris, though, like I said in the one theory, maybe when Chris was attacked, so-called by Jason, when she was young, I think it was 2 or 3 years before part 3, the events of part 3, where supposedly it was the whole thing. Everyone thought Jason raped her. That's been a big theory. What if she was having a prophetic dream that Jason and her were going to have an encounter? What if she was already seeing the future of her and Jason having their encounter in the events of part 3? And the event that she thinks happened really never happened. She was just asleep and she woke up at her house, and her family never talked about any of the conflict with Jason because it never happened. It hasn't happened yet. So when Jason lifts up her mask and she says, "It's you," Jason's like, "The fuck? Like, I don't know you. This is our first meeting." Like it's kind of like that, but she knows who he is. But then we go to the end. What does that mean? What does Pamela coming out of the water mean? Does that mean Pamela's reemerging? I mean, if they wanted to go that way, possibly. But it can mean one of two things. It could be pretty much the passing of the torch to Roy, because, I mean, Pamela killed out of vengeance. So then we get Roy in part 5 that's killing out of vengeance. Or you can look at it as a prophetic dream of the coming of part 6, where Pamela's undead spirit could be guiding Jason if they wanted to go that way. And that's why Jason comes back from the dead, killing once again. Like, it's all how you look at it from a broad perspective. Like, if you look at it just at face value for what you see on the screen and what it could mean beyond that, then yeah, it's going to look completely, really, really dumb. Did I see your last comment? Let me look up, Devin. Dream you fools, your God has turned its back on you. I don't know why I'm speaking that like Bane. But yeah, I saw Devin. I saw. What's going on, Ranger? What was your first horror movie? If I remember right, it's a toss-up because my sister was greatly into horror movies. And I remember Night of the Demons, Return of the Living Dead, Friday the 13th Part 6, and A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Those are the ones that I remember watching all within the first year of me getting into them, but I do not remember what was the actual first one. What's going on, Foxy? How you doing? And Ty, how you doing as well? Oh, big brain talk. I mean, that's kind of the basis on how my channel was created, because I mean, I look at these movies very uniquely, I've been told, with how I tend to overanalyze and try to look at stories from a different perspective. Freddy vs. Jason was your first horror movie, Devin? Holy shit, man. That's how you know you're young. You haven't lived through the golden years of horror. Do you think that the opening scene in part 2 is a mental hallucination and Alice is still alive? No. No. What I think is the twist on part 2 is that while we're led to believe, after the little girls splashing in the puddles, walking up the street, singing, I think it was like Itsy Bitsy Spider and all that, when we see the step of the adult that comes into the street, we assume that is Jason, because it's followed by the like all that. It's not the first time we've been sort of tricked with that before. I personally think that if it goes back to my theory that Paul and Jason were working together, I think that was Paul. I think Paul did all the groundwork finding Alice for Jason and let Jason kill her. And Jason took her back to his shack. That's what I think, as far as a theory-wise, what actually happened. On its face, again, you could say, well, it was Jason. But at the same time, how many times has Jason used a phone? This would be the first and only time. And for that neighborhood to be the way it looks, and to be that close to a kid with a parent calling for the kid to come inside the house, you don't recognize a guy with a sack on his head? And let's say he wasn't wearing the sack. We're talking about the 80s. A mongoloid would have definitely stood out and would have been prime suspect just because of his looks alone. That would have kind of led people on a search for a specific type of person, especially because if that person's new to the neighborhood, that would have been a prime suspect for the disappearance of Alice. And as Paul said, there was blood in her apartment. There would have been traces of Pamela's head in the apartment just being in the refrigerator. Like, I don't think Jason scrubbed everything. And then there's the whole thing of the fucking coffee pot that's like whistling, or teapot or whatever. Like, do you think Jason gives a fuck about it whistling? Or do you think that was Paul that moved the pot to silence things, to give him more time to get away? Plus, I mean, we do see Alice's corpse with the ice pick in the head in the shed. And it would have been 5 years later, so that's consistent with the way the corpse looks. Can you say something to... Can you say, I'm going to do something monstrous? I'm going to order a Subway sandwich without cheese in Bane's voice. Like, I guess.
I'm going to do something monstrous. I'm going to order a Subway sandwich without cheese.
How's that for you, Machete? So you're doing pretty good. Just finished watching a horror movie. What horror movie, Foxy? Enlighten me. Maybe I want to watch too. My first intro into Freddy was Nightmare, the series at 5. Oh, okay. Which Nightmare? Which Nightmare? Oh, the series. Oh, okay. So Freddy's Nightmares. Is that what you're talking about, Nick? But saw Friday the 13th part. Which part? Friday the 13th at 10. Ty says, how was Superman in the death of Superman? You mean the comics or the animated movie? Or even, are you talking about the Henry Cavill iteration of it? I need more info, Ty. Also, why was Pamela's head in the fridge? It was a mind game. Because Alice decapitated Pamela. So Jason wanted to show her in his mind, or maybe even Paul's idea, to show her why she's being killed. This is why you're being killed. Like, this person that you murdered is the reason why I'm here. It was sort of a revenge tactic. Ty says, my first horror movie was Frankenstein, 1931. It's not a bad one to start out with at all. Which, Ty, have you ever watched Penny Dreadful? Not the new series, City of Angels. That's okay, but I mean the series that came out like 4 or 5 years ago with Josh Hartnett and Timothy Dalton. It's got a nice little take on Frankenstein on there. Vibe Check God says, I'm not sure, but I think mine was Night of the Living Dead. That's not a bad one either. Now, did you watch the original black and white one or the re-release in color? Same movie, but one's colorized, one's not. Or did you watch the Russo cut where they added some scenes in there? What's going on, Nicholas? If I want to watch the Freddy versus Jason, I wouldn't known who Jason was, and I wouldn't have found your channel. So it all worked out in the end. Yeah, I can agree with that. If Paul worked with Jason, how would Paul survive their first encounter? He did. Paul did survive. I mean, I think if you mean off screen, I think that Paul and Jason likely had a relationship, maybe dating back to going to Camp Crystal Lake. Maybe Paul was one of the kids there that was friends with Jason, possibly. But there's always that possibility. But if we're talking on screen, Paul did survive his first encounter with Jason, which is how he got to the shack, which is still questionable of how he even knew where the shack was. You look like a person who would call a milkshake a milk cake. If it's thick enough, it will be a milk cake. Jason's shack has to smell with all the dead bodies in there. Oh yeah, something that confined and the rotting flesh. Oh, you smell. You smell a lot. Like, it's not hard. Hey, what's going on, mommy? How you doing? Welcome back. And Elizabeth as well. I forgot to mention, welcome back as well. It was called the Banana Splits movie. Oh, yeah, the Banana Splits movie. That's not bad. I like that. It was sort of like, I got the Five Nights at Freddy's vibe to it. But I believe the Banana Splits was actually a cartoon that they kind of took into a horror license kind of thing, which I liked. It wasn't bad. How old was Superman in the death of Superman? It's hard to say because ages seem to stagnate in comics. No one seems to age. It's not like Judge Dredd or the old Hellblazer comics with John Constantine, where every year passed in the real world was a year in the comic book world. So it's hard to say, especially with all the reboots from Crisis of Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, and so forth like that. I mean, if I was to guess, maybe late 30s, early 40s, maybe. Nick says, my first intro to Freddy was Nightmare the Series. You said that before, Nick, but you said Nightmare the Series, so I'm assuming you mean Freddy's Nightmares from the late 80s. But then you say you saw, oh, Friday the 13th Part 2. Gotcha. Friday the 13th Part 2 at 10 years old. Not bad. I thought you typed the same thing. Like, wait a minute. I'm missing the age again. Machete says, when she screamed, I thought she was scared because there was no eggs. Or no milk. One or the other. I can't fucking make pancakes. Elizabeth says, I read a book called The Death of a Hero, and the hero didn't even die. I mean, the whole thing is with that, it could mean it in a metaphorical sense, Elizabeth. Maybe the hero doesn't actually die, but the idea of a hero dies. Or the morality of the hero dies. There's many ways you could go about that. It's never, with books and literature, you don't always have to go by the literal sense because it can mean multiple things. You just have to look at it. If you're looking for just one thing, like death or anything like that, like an actual body being there, then you may get disappointed. You watch the original black and white version. Have you ever seen the Russo cut, Vod? So you did like Penny Dreadful. I liked it, but I could see if it's on a watch it. I don't see myself following it. I mean, true. I mean, with that, I thought it was just an interesting alternate take on the classic Universal monsters with Dracula, the Wolfman. I guess Eva Green's character Vanessa was supposed to be in some relation to the Mummy because I mean her stuff did kind of relate overall to Egyptian culture, so it could have been with that. But overall, I found it interesting. I liked it better after the series was over to watch everything, But the Dracula scenes, once they got into that in season 3, was really good. What's going on, Sebastian? Paul's the true villain of Friday the 13th. He needs to come back and die. I wouldn't mind Paul coming back and possibly having that revelation that he sort of set everyone up at Packanack to be killed in order to try to get some kind of notoriety to being the sole survivor, possibly not even sole survivor, but being like Jenny and surviving with her to gain some of the similar notoriety that Alice would have gotten. Hey, what's going on, Matt? How you doing? Nick says, and I remember in the Nightmare TV series, showed a guy running on a treadmill. Then the treadmill was thrown into reverse and the guy was somehow killed, because I never saw that in the movies. Yeah, that was never in the movies. I'm not sure what episode that is, but I mean, they were just trying to be inventive back then. Machete says, JG, are you trying to say you know what dead bodies smell like? I do. I used to work at a cemetery. Tried cleaning a mausoleum with no fucking airflow going in there. And like scraping bodies off of cement. That you will get a affinity for that smell. How long do you think until the Friday the 13th lawsuit ends? I hope soon. Technically, the lawsuit's already over. We're now going through the appeals process. That is going to last quite a bit, because even if the appeal doesn't go Sean Cunningham's way, we still have to look at a monetary deal between Sean and Victor. If they do not come to a monetary deal, then they can use their IP separately in any way they want. So we could technically get Friday the 13th related property, but it would be like telling half a story, because each property can only use certain bits from their own IP. But I would probably say, if I could put a timetable on it, I think we could probably look for Friday the 13th to go into production maybe in about 2-3 years. How is Montana, Elizabeth? Nick says, I wish the Dark Universe was still going. I wish the Dark Universe led more into horror. They wanted to go the action route. That's what killed them. Machete says, oh, by the way, JG, I asked Dave McRae yesterday on his Two Dudes and Some Bullshit stream about how he does those streams with someone else. And later in the stream, he mentions using Google Hangouts. Oh, nice. I was checking out Google Hangouts, but haven't actually tested their actual programs yet. I'm definitely going to check it out, because Dave McRae's setup is fucking wicked. Devin says, yeah, we want to go to McDonald's. What's going on, Prog Fusion? How you doing? Prog says, killer channel. Seeing cosplay still stands for cringe. For fans of the series, I just saw an amazing fan film called on YouTube called Friday the 13th Vengeance. Already way ahead of you. I already saw the original release of Vengeance, and then I saw 2.0. 2.0, I definitely recommend. Ty says, what if you did something like Paul was a serial killer and he got caught and later admitted that, yeah, I set everything up and he's in prison, like he has that more notoriety thing? I mean, that could possibly work too. But I mean, I think that if that was to be the case, that kind of undermines his being missing for so long. And at least from what I think, because I would want him and his friend in hiding, and possibly when they think the coast is clear, Jason's gone, there's no threat, and things start getting brought up, like how they have documentaries going back to the history of Camp Blood and so forth. Paul would eventually be brought up, and he has no evidence to put him there. it's all circumstantial. And the most he might get charged for, just on its face, is possibly, just possibly, negligence. And not having proper security around Packanack while these young people are helping him open a camp. But I could see him possibly as a publicity thing, taking back Packanack and trying to reopen it. Because, I mean, I believe they said he bought it, right? It is his property. So technically, he should still be able to open that if he wanted to. Maybe even as a Halloween haunt kind of thing. But, I mean, there's multiple ways they could go about that. And then multiple ways they could reveal that, too. Elizabeth says, what is Friday the 13th being sued for? They're technically not being sued. The copyright for Friday the 13th in the US is being disputed by the original writer, who was able to reclaim his IP back from his original employer. That would be pretty much under his legal right. And given how much Friday the 13th has made, he was able to take back that IP in order to make a new monetary deal in order to make up that ground. They're arguing that, or at least Sean is arguing, that Victor Miller was a work for hire, which if you look at some of the documentaries, there are some bits of evidence that suggests that, and the courts even ruled, that Victor Miller was not a work for hire when he wrote the first draft. Maybe at some point after that, he did sign a contract with Sean, but the original IP was already created at that point. So he is within his legal rights to take back his IP 35 years later, which is the same thing that the Wes Craven estate did with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, this is only valid in the US because Horror Inc. would still own the copyright overseas. But if you don't have US distribution rights, then essentially the IP means nothing, because you can still make some money over there, but you're not going to make the amount of money that you will, or get the notoriety that you will, without a US theatrical release. What do I think of the Friday the 13th fan films? I love them. I love them. Even the bad ones, I look at it like this. Like with Friday the 13th fan films, it does its job by keeping the franchise alive in its own way. It's sort of like telling campfire stories. Everyone can create a campfire story with Jason, or the Friday the 13th style, so to speak. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be set within Camp Crystal Lake, and you can go to Roy Burns or Pamela Voorhees or anything like that route. It just has the basis there. And the way these fan films are going, it's keeping the public consciousness aware that Jason is still around. Like, once everything is done and we're able to get Friday the 13th movies, he's there. He's always at the forefront of everyone's mind. I mean, he is, for all intents and purposes, one of the biggest faces of horror ever. How do you even take us to McDonald's, Harley? I mean, just order DoorDash for us. We'll give you our addresses and get DoorDash and have it brought to us. Matt says, there is a story out there where it ends with Jason getting married. Interesting. I've never heard of that. Ty says, completely fine with a new Friday the 13th movie as long as Ty Romulus Nyberg directed and JG writes it. I can deal with that. I can deal with that. Although I can be quite of a diva, Ty. I will definitely be on set like, hey, make sure you get this. Make sure you get that. Nick says, I sent you a pic of my black Jason mask on Discord, but you never got back with me. Did you? Did you put it in the cosplay share channel, Nick? Because I don't remember seeing it. I checked my Discord before I came on, and I don't remember seeing a black Jason mask. Ranger says, JG, I think Paul moved to Canada. He might have. Dead Corp says, did you know that Tom McLaughlin has plans to make a direct sequel to Part 6 after the lawsuit is over? Yes, he has a script written. He plans to set it in 1999. From what I remember, he wanted an all-female cast, which I know a lot of people, I know Ty especially, he's voiced his opinion on it because he does believe that it is going the way of possibly Black Christmas. I personally think otherwise. I think that if you were going to do anything with an all-female cast, Friday the 13th kind of lends itself to that because you can have an all-female camp. That would kind of make sense. You're not shoehorning that in. Now, if you're going to make a Friday the 13th movie and you're going to have undertones like the latest Black Christmas had, I'm not interested. I'm not interested at all. Let's make this natural. Let's make this organic. If it's a female, all-female camp, go for it. But don't make it just because you have a social commentary that you want to give in a Friday the 13th movie. Of all franchises, Friday the 13th is not that property to have any kind of political sense in it at all. Ty says, what if Chris Farley played Tommy Jarvis back in the 90s or late 90s? That would have been an interesting take, to say the least. I wouldn't have wanted it, unfortunately. I love Chris Farley, but I wouldn't have wanted that. Jason getting married to Pamela. I'm not sure their love is like that. But you never know. Never know. What's going on, Kat? Oh, you sent it to me directly? Really? When did you send it, Nick? Because I don't remember seeing any messages that had a mask in it. I don't know if that will work, Ty. I don't know if that will work. Like, I need to be here. But that's pretty much, I mean, with me writing anything, I have a specific sense of how I see things play out. So I think I would probably have that whole thing, like, writer and director in my head, that I need it to be like this. But I mean, I think that kind of works in that relationship if writers and directors are close in hand, because the writer and director should be cohesive. I want no feminist bullshit in my Friday the 13th movies. Now, I mean, you can have a feminist character. Don't get me wrong. You can have a feminist character because, I mean, in reality, if a camp opens, especially in present day, you're going to have people that are feminists, whether they actually believe they're feminists or they're just doing it for attention. The same thing with misogynist or alt-right or anything, any kind of those extremist kind of groups. They're going to be doing it for attention, or they actually believe it, and they come everywhere. Like, it's in all forms. So it makes sense that you would get one or two characters in Friday the 13th over its long time span. But to do what they did in the last Black Christmas, where almost every single female character was like that, that's a bit much. And the way they tried to shove it down your throat even further with the villain, that was a bit much. Jason has no indiscretion if we're bringing Jason back. He has no indiscretion. He doesn't care about women's rights. He doesn't care about men's rights. He doesn't care about anything. Like, he is there to kill. And in my mind, to get back to his mother. That's the only thing that matters to him. Or if you go by Tom McLaughlin's reasoning, the only thing he cares about is getting back to his mother in the afterlife, because he's pissed that he got awoken by Tommy. He was finally where he was. He was laid to rest and ultimately was done. Like, he was happy. But Tommy brought him back, and that pissed him off to no end. And he's taking his rage out on everyone else. Corn. Yes. Ty says, let me say, I need to see the script before I make more harsh judgments about it. But the way society is now with political correctness, I'm worried about Tom McLaughlin's script. I mean, with anything like that, yeah, it's good to be cautious with a script on anything. But I mean, given that Tom McLaughlin has created one of the more popular or universally popular Friday the 13th films that is dubbed the MTV Friday the 13th, I think it is good to give him the benefit of the doubt. Plus, this could be a first draft. There's a good chance that pretty much his script may see 3 or 4 different drafts before it even touches the screen. Matt says, can you give my channel a shout out on YouTube? The Horror Fan. Yeah, give Matt a check out. Like, check him out on the Horror Fan YouTube channel. Got some interesting theories going on over there as well, and some other videos. So yeah, give them a check out. Dead Corpse says, I don't want them to continue after part 6. That sequel is kind of overrated. They should just continue after part 4. And I don't think they should set it in the 1990s. I mean, if we're going by overall popularity universally, it makes sense to go after part 6. And I mean, I would personally like to see what they would do at the end of part 4. Like if we go back to an undead Jason or possibly a ghost version of Jason. Both could be, or like how I said before, like another theory. What if when Tommy distracted Jason and Trish cut the mask off of Jason, what if at that point Tommy felt so helpless that he constructed in his head him killing Jason and slashing at him on the ground over and over and over? Everything that happens from the point that Tommy sees Trish get grabbed by Jason is all in his head, even the hospital parts. What if all of that in his head is in his head and he constructed all of that because he felt so helpless that Trish was being murdered by Jason right in front of him and Jason escaped? That's one way you could do that too. Ranger says, JG, did you hear about the plan for a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie in 2021? The one produced by Fede Alvarez that they're rebooting sort of as a new part 2? Yes, I heard about that one. Ranger also says, JG, next DVD killer, a vampire, and next survivor, Abraham Lincoln. That'd be interesting. That'd be some interesting takes on things. Although I'm not sure if they need a license for Abraham Lincoln, maybe for his likeness, maybe, because I mean everything sort of exchanges money at one point. Nick says, I wish all the movies had been turned into book novels. I mean, that still could happen, though. Dr. Plague, can Jason come to Dead by Daylight? Yes, he can come to Dead by Daylight. The question is when. If Behavior was able to get a hold of both Victor and Sean, and they were able to make a monetary deal splitting the rights and the payment that they would get for Jason being in the game, you stand a good chance of getting Jason in the game. However, the only thing is where most DLC is usually what, like $8-10 maybe? With Jason, you're probably going to be looking at double that because Sean is not going to want anything taking off the premium of his license. And Victor, in spite of Sean or vice versa, is going to want the same thing. So you're going to have to pay both people for the same amount as if you were paying one. Like, let's say for John Carpenter and Michael Myers. To go to him and be like, you know, hey, we want to use Michael Myers, Laurie Strode, and Haddonfield. They pay John Carpenter or they pay Universal, whoever owns the full right. I think it's Universal. So they pay Universal one sum and they're able to sell it for, I think, like $7.99 or something like that. And Universal takes their cut, Behavior takes their cut. With something like Jason, a survivor, and Camp Crystal Lake, you got to pay Victor his cut, Sean his cut, and then you pretty much take the rest as profit. And because of that, you have to sort of raise the price for a Friday the 13th chapter. That's why I don't think that it's going to happen just yet. After the appeal is over, and if it's known that Sean and Victor can't make a deal, then you likely will see that come as a act of desperation between Behavior they may bite the bullet and just break even on having Jason in the game, or pretty much maybe even less. Like, they may just want to have him in the game just out of desperation to complete the Mount Rushmore of horror that they already have. So, like, I think that's going to be a last resort, if that makes any sense. Harley says, I didn't like Black Christmas 2019. It was nothing like the original, and I love the original. Agreed, Harley. Black Christmas 2019 shouldn't even have been called Black Christmas. Or if it was, it should have marketed itself as not having anything to do with that property, because it had nothing to do with that property at all. In my opinion, Part 8 is my favorite Friday the 13th film. I mean, I'm sure you're not alone. You're just not in my company with that. I do not like Part 8. Part 8, I think, honestly, in my opinion, was one of the weaker Friday the 13th films. But I mean, to each their own. As I said, it's all subjective. But I mean, it's no secret that Friday the 13th Part 8 I really didn't like, as far as the Paramount ones. Hey, what's going on, Paris? So you planned on finishing the harness today, but I got the wrong type of webbing. Wasn't thick enough, so I had to spend $9 more than intended because I fucked up. Oh, no worries, man. It happens. It happens. What's going on, Rudy? How you doing? Welcome. So I just want more NECA figures. I need my Ultimate Part 7. I would love an Ultimate Part 7. I would love a clothed Ultimate Part 7. That I would absolutely fucking kill for. What's going on, Jared? How you doing? Yeah, like, more NECA figures, that would be awesome. I mean, as much as I don't like Part 8, I would want a Part 8 figure, even. If you can get me a clothed... I mean, I'm obsessed with the clothed figures. Like, I love those. May even grab me up a clothed 2018 Michael. Or even the clothed Halloween 2. But definitely, we need some more clothed Friday the 13th figures. I would love that. Dead Corp says, my faves are 1, 2, 3, and 4. But my most fave is 4. I have part 4 listed as my number 1 on my rankings. So I'm definitely with you on that. Nick says, if I could make a Friday the 13th game, it would have a Splatterhouse type vibe to it. But with 6 players like the LGN. Only without the zombie characters in it. I mean, that could be fun. That could be fun. Abraham Lincoln is copyrighted under the U.S. government? Really? I mean, how do you copyright a living person? I mean, I know you can copyright their likeness, but that's usually goes with their family. Not like the U.S. government. That'd be weird. Dr. Plague says, why don't they have a reboot on Friday the 13th? They do. The last reboot they did was in 2009. And if I remember right, they did have another reboot in the works before the lawsuit came about and Paramount pulled the plug on it. They also had a TV show that was going to be coming, which I believe Slash and Cast and a couple other various channels around the web have shown the hockey mask and the makeup effects that they were going to use for both the movie and the TV show. So the lawsuit coming up kind of threw a wrench in all of that. The movie, I'm kind of glad that we didn't get, because with the way they were doing it, with having Elias in it, Pamela in it, and then Jason in it, giving us all 3 of them as killers through each third of the movie, it was like kind of weird. Jared says, I've been working on my cosplay of the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie in 1990. Just spray painted my helmet and blades for my hands. Nice. Very nice. I love Shredder in that movie. Like that end scene with him on the rooftop just beating the shit out of the turtles. That's one of my favorite scenes of all time. And one of, in my opinion, one of the most emotional comic book scenes ever filmed. Ranger says, JG, my favorite look for Jason is part 6 and 7 versus in the remake. I could deal with that. I mean, the remake I kind of liked. I felt like they probably could have worked on the sides of the head a little bit, and I don't know, there was just something off about that overall makeup that, I mean, I could buy that it was Jason, but there was just something off about it to me. I mean, maybe it's because the one ear that's supposed to be protruding outwards, they made a tiny ear like that big, and that kind of bothered me. But I mean, in part 3, there's scenes where Jason has an ear that sticks out, and there's other scenes where Jason has no ear, and it just looks like a part of female anatomy. So say. Rudy says, little off topic, but I would love if NECA got the rights back to Resident Evil and re-released all of their archive stuff in ultimate form. I would too. Again, can you imagine a cloned Nemesis figure? With the way they do their cloned figures? Like, because I mean, I got a couple of them. I got Sam from Trick or Treat, Candyman. I just got the Nun like last week. Pinhead is kind of cloned because the skirt is kind of like clothed material. Fucking, I think that's all I got right now, but I love all of them. So I can imagine some Resident Evil clone figures. I would love that. Part 3 or part 7. I like those ones best out of the Friday the 13th series. Not bad, not bad. You can't go wrong with either. I mean, as far as story goes, I do like part 3 better. Part 7 was a little bit lacking in the story department, but had some really cool kills. The best special effects makeup, in my opinion, for Jason. And to me, kind of a really haunting tone over the film. It was just kind of lacking in story. Because, I mean, it was just like throw Tina out there, that's how she brings them back, and go from there. It's kind of just like a collection of ideas thrown into a movie. I mean, it worked out. It was cool, but it was, I have to sort of acknowledge that story wasn't exactly all there. Dead Corpse says, I'd rather have the next Friday film to continue after part 4 than part 6. I believe you said that already. I think we already covered that. Jared Flippin. Didn't MTV make a series of Scream? Yes, they did. And I believe the last season was moved to VH1, if I remember, when they went back to the original Ghostface costume. Season 1 and 2, I watched 1 or 2 episodes of and couldn't get into it. And then when they went back to the original Scream costume, I watched that 6-episode series. And while I enjoyed having the original Scream voice and the original Scream costume back, the quality and the acting was abysmal. Like, I couldn't get into it. I think Tom Savini should do makeup for all the Friday. I think Tom Savini's mostly retired from special effects makeup. I wouldn't mind him having him as a director for a Friday the 13th movie. But I think as far as makeup effects, he might lend a helping hand, but he's not exactly doing makeup like that anymore. You have a good night, Dave, or good afternoon, whatever time it is. What's Abraham Lincoln's attack going to be? Sending zombie slaves after you? I mean, in the terms of Dead by Daylight, if they add Abraham Lincoln in it, I would imagine that would be the Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter version. And he has an axe. So, we could have that. Nick says, I never liked the 3D Friday the 13th movie. I never liked the 3D effect of the Part 3 movie. Part 3, though, I really liked. Because, I mean, you gotta love the first time Jason puts on the hockey mask. And there's some really iconic scenes in there. Dr. Plague says, I hope they add Chucky and Jason one day in Dead by Daylight. I mean, Jason, we already know that could be coming and will possibly be a definite in the future at some point. I can see behavior definitely sacrificing to get Jason in. Chucky, Now, a lot of people are assuming that, well, if you get Chucky in there, he's going to be the small guy. I don't think they're going to do it like that because you got to remember the entity changes things in Dead by Daylight. So, what if Chucky is infused with the power by the entity in order to make his sacrifices and gives him a resize to the size of the hag? Now, you could almost have him run a certain way and all that, but he's ultimately the size of the hag. He's still a small guy, but at least he's bigger to after being powered by the entity. That's the way I think is a workaround for Chucky. Oh man, fully articulated tyrant. I would love that, Rudy. He also says Part 7 is my favorite solely based on Kane. Very true. Kane in Part 7 played Jason very definitively. I do love Kane's performance. I mean, as everyone knows, my favorite is still Richard Brooker and Ted White. I love their portrayals. Kane kind of took both of those portrayals and kind of combined them in a sense. And pretty much like it was the whole thing. Like as Kane even said, we haven't seen Jason be really pissed off until Part 7. Jason was extremely pissed off in Part 7. I mean, he was pissed off in Part 4 too when he got the slash across his chest and he breaks the lamp and everything. But we didn't see him to that pissed off degree that he was in Part 7. Vibe Check says the only retro clothed NECA figure I have is Part 1 Freddy. I don't have that one. Although I'm looking at possibly getting the Mezco Freddy that's clothed. Nick says 3 was great but didn't need a 3D element. Very true. Very, very true. But I mean, it was a gimmick back then, especially with third entries into a series. So I understand why they did it. I just wasn't a fan of the 3D effect. Elizabeth says, I think my brother will grow up to be a rape. What? Wait, what? What was that? You may want to reread that because I think if you're trying to spell rapper, Elizabeth, you're missing a P in there. And possibly someone is reporting your brother right now. Reread that and look at the word before you say he roasts is pretty good. His roast is pretty good. You may want to reread that. Rudy says Chris Higgins is my favorite final girl. Not a bad one. She's not a bad one. My favorite is still Jenny. Jenny, I'm in that camp until I die with that one. I love Jenny. Nick says, and that hockey mask was a Detroit Red Wings hockey mask. Very true. Yep. Which I think those masks, that style, dates all the way back to the 50s, if I remember right. It's a better leader, Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, they said Napoleon almost took over the world. So, I mean, you got to go with that. Ranger says, JG is Mia the Entity. I mean, there's a particular YouTube channel that tends to think so. What's going on? The Boss Chief, how you doing? Or the Boss Chef. Like, seeing an I in there, but there's no I. Like, no Chief, no Boss Chef. Jenny goes WWE. What? Who? Huh? What we talking about? All right. I think while we have this brief moment of silence, I am going to go grab something to drink real quick. I'll be right back. But I do have the cosplay share video for you guys today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that, grab something to drink real quick, and I will be right back. But until then, enjoy the cosplay shares, and check these guys out on Instagram when I put their links up on the channel, or in the JG Darhk Hordes of Horror Facebook page. All right, back refreshed and ready to go. What's going on, Brenda? How you doing? I don't know why I'm here. I haven't even watched any of the Friday the 13th movies. Really? You haven't watched any of the Friday the 13th movies at all, Brenda? Like, I mean, is that by choice, or you just never got around to it? Or slasher movies just not your thing? Because, I mean, just because you play Dead by Daylight doesn't necessarily mean that slasher movies would be essentially your thing. Because, I mean, I've known some streamers that don't like horror movies at all. But yes, for you guys watching the share video, be sure to check them out on Instagram or whatever various other social platforms that they're on. I will be linking all of their Instagram pages, because that's usually where I get them from. I'll be linking all of those in the community tab of this channel with one of the pictures of the cosplayers, as well as I will be linking all of their pages on the JG Darhk Hordes of Horror Facebook group. If you're not a member yet, be sure to grab them up. Check it out. I wouldn't go that far, Dev. I would be like, what you're doing here? I mean, some people pretty much just weren't exactly into the Friday the 13th movies. And I mean, who knows? Maybe they come in not a fan and they leave as a fan. You never know. So definitely, Brenda, feel free to stick around if you want, as we talk to Friday the 13th. If it sounds interesting to you, and I believe Amazon Prime, if you have it, they got a ton of those movies on there. Feel free to check them out. Maybe you get into it. Never know. You're missing a P in there, Elizabeth, if you mean rapper. As again, judging by that sentence, I think your brother may be getting some kind of authorities called on him right now. Oh, man. Oh, you haven't bought the movies. Okay. I mean, that's as good a reason as any. Do you have like Amazon Prime or anything like that? Dr. Plez says, who won the lawsuit? Initially, it was Victor Miller. Victor Miller did win the lawsuit. Sean Cunningham and Horror Inc. appealed it. but I believe even in the appeals process, Victor still owns what he was awarded. And the only way that changes is if the court that they went to, after they had their oral arguments, kind of sides with Sean and overturns it, which seems highly unlikely. The next step after that, I believe, is either gets taken down to the circuit court, I believe, again, or it can be taken to the Supreme Court. Both I don't see really happening, and I don't see a scenario where Sean Cunningham wins either one. So we're going to be probably stuck with both Sean and Victor splitting the overall copyright. Ranger says, JG, did you know that the Trappers map is located somewhere in Seattle, Washington? Really? I did not know that. I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to send emojis. You know, Harley, if you join the channel membership, you get a ton of special emojis. And who knows, if you're that special member that allows me to get more emojis, then maybe I will take your input on what to add next. Okay, the thing is, Elizabeth, you may want to look up pretty much the musical term of rapping and how to spell it. You're missing a letter in there, because the way you're putting it on there now is basically your brother is going to be a sexual predator named Shite McTittyballs. Boss Chef says, I love Jason's death in part 4. It was good. I like that. I liked Savini's effects with that. Like splitting the machete, going up the head, and having the top of the head kind of turn. I really like that. Yeah, Elizabeth. Now, if your brother is rapping, it is spelled like that. Now, if that's not what you mean, and you're talking about being a sexual predator, 1, that's not cool. And 2, your brother needs help. Devin says, your brother is a what? Exactly. Legend has it JG uses the tier money to steal cheese balls. Who told you such things? Says humping CDs. Kevin Bacon's death was good too. I like how it was done out of a mistake, and they kind of just like blew in the tube to blow the blood out. That was pretty cool. I like that. Wasn't bad. You could be, Ty. You could be. I mean, technically, we don't really see you in any of your Indiana Jones videos as well. So you could be doing those as without clothes too. Like, there's no evidence. I don't see anything against it. What's going on, Ansley? How you doing? So you love my Jason videos. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you love them. Which anyone in particular that you like? Or just pretty much going through all of them. All right. There'll be no more talk of that, Elizabeth, if that's what you're getting at. No more talk of that. Exactly, Vaughn. Exactly. Like, no, as I said, no more talk of that. Nobody. Like, get off of that. Get off that subject. Like, it has nothing to do with the context of anything in hand. So we're going to try to redirect things into a better thing here. So you have Google Play and you ain't seen Friday the 13th movies in the horror section? Gonna search it? Okay. I mean, does Netflix have it at all? I'm not sure. I know Amazon Prime does, like Prime Video, that you can stream it off that if you have Prime for free. But I'm not sure if I think Netflix may have some, assuming that you have Netflix, Brendan. What would Jason's ability be if he was in Dead by Daylight? Not traps, right? No. Because, I mean, Jason didn't use bear traps really until the remake reboot. So I wouldn't have that. I mean, I would want to say stalking, but we already have Michael Myers and Ghostface that does that. So it would have to be a stalk in a different kind of way. I mean, the way I would kind of want to do it is maybe Jason has some kind of lunge attack that is able to actually pull you through a window. So if you're like even bolting or trying to get over something, he can bolt to you and grab you and pull you off of something. Sort of like the pig, where the pig has its lunge attack, but the lunge itself is if you're in the clear, then it's a swipe. If you're climbing over something, it's a grab. Maybe something like that. Because, I mean, teleportation, we already got someone that does that. I mean, maybe they can bring Shift over from the Friday the 13th game. Maybe. Or Sense. They can probably use one of his powers from the game itself, like either Sense or Shift. That would be two of the things I would think. Nick says, the reason I watch horror movies is to see how characters will die. But the characters I didn't like seeing die was Vicky, Part 2, Sissy, Part 6, Kelly Hu in Part 8. Okay. I mean, personally, I feel like with most movies, the characters are supposed to be at least semi-likable. So, pretty much when they do get killed, it's like, oh man, that's fucked up. Like the dude in the wheelchair. I forget his name in Part 2. He was a good dude. And Jason ended up killing him. It was like a quick swipe going into the face, and he goes down the steps and everything. I mean, it was like a momentary thing. Like, oh man, that sucks. But then you move on. It's when you get to things like the remake reboot where nobody's likable. Like the one dude, Chewie, that gets the screwdriver through the neck. Like, okay, move on to the next one. And stuff like that. It was like rinse and repeat. Like, didn't really care at all. And on top of it, you kind of need a story to make sense of everything. Because, I mean, if you're just watching characters get killed, then ultimately you're not really paying attention to a ton of the story or making sense of everything. You just want to see a compilation thing of killers killing people. Ansley says, I love them all, but I like the one about Paul and Jason's real father. Oh, nice. Especially the Jason's real father one. That was my first Dark Theories video. So I greatly appreciate that. And feel free to stick around. Check them all out. Let me know what you think. Feel free to comment. If you don't like something, feel free to comment. Let me know. Friday the 13th Part 3 is my favorite because Andy's dead. Oh, nice balls. Nice. Ranger says, JG, damn it, Jason, stop camping. You can't get mad at Jason for camping at that point. He's literally a campground killer. I think Dead Corpse says, I think they should have got Tom Savini to do the makeup for Jason in Part 6 because Part 6, Jason's face looks kind of inconsistent with Part 4. Not exactly. If you look at the makeup of Part 6, if you look at it, if you can brighten up the screen when you see it, you see some of the wrinkles. The only thing that's really inconsistent is the teeth. Because those teeth, when you go back to Part 4 that protrude out, they're not there. But overall, you kind of have a... now, the Jason-shaped head, that is inconsistent. Yes, I will agree with you on that. But as far as the facial structure, it's very consistent with something that would be dead for as long as Jason was. With those deformities. Devin says, Mommy, are you here? I want Burger King. I think she left. Not left, but I think she's not getting you no Burger King. If she gets you Burger King, she's got to get me Burger King. Brenda says, y'all, there's no OG Friday the 13th on Google Play. Oh, man, that sucks. Especially because I would love for you, for someone that's never seen it, Friday the 13th at all, to be able to binge all of them. Or at least the first. If you got to binge any of them, you can binge the first 5 as the more grounded, realistic version of that series, and then go from there on as the Undead version and really see how things evolve. But once you get a hold of them, Brenda, definitely check them out. Let me know what you think about them. Jumba, oh, let's say Jumba, like you're not Ty. Ty says, what if they made a slasher movie about the Burger King gang? Never know. They did it with the banana splits as robots, so you never know. A guy in a Burger King suit can flip out and start fucking putting people in the fryers. What's going on, Anthony? Anthony says, the Friday the 13th, 2009 is one of the worst movies. Wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. I wasn't a fan of the 2009 Friday the 13th because personally, I don't like that Jason is guarding a weed field, essentially. It's not what he's doing actively. He's still at Camp Crystal Lake doing the whole, like, killing anybody that trespasses and everything. But bringing the original people there at the beginning of the movie there to hunt down weed was stupid. I don't need any of that. Why couldn't we get a remake that reopened the camp, which makes sense because it's what the original was about, reopening the camp. I don't know why they did that. And then pretty much after the camp and everything gets shut down after the murders, the character Clay's sister gets taken, nobody can find her, then you do the Higgins Haven storyline with the other characters. Like, possibly. That would have possibly been something better than what they did. But they were hitting certain beats. We need a body count. We need things to be brutal. We need things to be bloody. We barely have a story. And we need as many topless girls in this movie having sex as much as possible. And it hit those beats, but it was at the sacrifice of everything else that made Friday the 13th. Because, I mean, oddly enough, Friday the 13th, if you look at part 1, 2, 3, and 4, there's not that much nudity. There's not. Like, you might see 2 or 3 topless scenes in those 4 films combined. So it's not based off nudity at all. Which, to have that in the remake reboot was very disingenuous. And to focus so much on that was very disingenuous. Hey, what's going on, Matthew? About to say Matthew. What's going on, Matt? How you doing? Uncle Matt. Nick says, if you look up calendar wise, Jason was born on a Thursday, not a Friday. Very true. On our real calendar, that may be the case. But we're talking about a fictional calendar that also places a Friday the 13th in 1979 at that point in time when the movie takes place, not 1980 when it actually took place. So things are a bit shifted in the fictional calendar versus the real calendar. Hey, what's going on, Super Cat? How you doing? I mean, that's the thing, Ty. I didn't mind nudity in the movies. I don't mind it, but it seems like when they were making the Friday the 13th 2009 movie, that was mostly what they were focusing on. Like, hey, we can't do this movie without like tits everywhere. We can't do it. It's just not to be done. Like, we had to get it in the beginning. We had to get it during the the boat scene. Fucking even Andy from the fucking Boots the Reboots thing, when he did on Friday the 13th, his mockery of Friday the 13th with him being against Jason and Freddy and all that, his interaction with his version of Jason on there was more true to the original series and captured more of the tone of the original Friday the 13th series than any of the remake or reboot did. And that was the problem, because the remake reboot did not capture hardly anything of the Friday. It was very generic in the sense of campground, killer, mask. We didn't even get the Jason sound throughout the film. We got it like 3 or 4 times, which should have been littered throughout the entire film. They just focused on blood, guts, and nudity. That's literally it. And it kind of took me very much out of that film. And then having the whole weed thing in there, unlikable characters throughout the entire cast, even actors that I like Danielle Panabaker and the other guy from Supernatural I liked, but just even they were unlikable in that movie. It's just like it didn't strike home to me the way it should have. As a huge Friday the 13th fan, it just didn't do it. Why do you think Terry was in Jason's shack? I mean, he was hiding all the bodies in the shack. He hid the deputy, it was the deputy in the shack too. He had Alice's 5-year decayed corpse in the shack. He had a couple bodies in there. So I think it was just him offering the bodies to his mother, sort of like sacrifices to her. Ranger says, did the police even property search the camp in the remake? No, they didn't. The general consensus was they leave Jason alone, he leaves them alone. Which is weird that the cop comes up to the camp all nonchalantly if that is the case among the locals. Which is very, very odd. And especially the guy that's in the barn that Jason takes the mask from he takes the mask from him in the deleted scene, but ultimately he finds the mask after slitting his throat in the barn. You would figure this is all a close-knit area, so you would figure they would know that, Jason's around here. Like, people go missing all the time, like the one lady from Texas Chainsaw said. So why isn't this a more commonly knowledge thing to this guy that's fucking mannequins and reading dirty magazines and smoking weed and all that shit? Like, doesn't make any sense. Like, it was just very oddly written, or at least oddly directed, if that wasn't in the script. Well, I mean, Ty, like, I'm not complaining about nudity. The whole thing with it is, personally, when I watch Friday the 13th, especially when as high in regard as I hold part 1 through 5, 5 having a ton of fucking, well, not even a ton of nudity in there. We had 2 topless scenes, I believe, right? That is right. Like 2 topless scenes? No, 3. 3. I'm wrong. 3 topless scenes. So that was the most. They matched in 5 what we got in the rest of the series as a whole prior to that point. So I'll grant you that. We got 6 topless scenes in 5 movies in Friday the 13th. We had like 4 or 5 in the remake alone. And it was the way they were doing the sex scenes was tantamount to fucking making Friday the 13th a porno. I didn't come to Friday the 13th to watch a porno. I got porn sites for that if I want to watch that. But I've come to watch a cohesive story that paints Jason as a sympathetic figure, which they tried to do in some sense, but it was overshadowed by the unlikable characters, the terrible tone, and just fucking putting boobs in your face every 5 minutes. Oh, no, you're good, Ty. You're good. But I know some people will take that as like, he's complaining about titties. Like, no, I want to get my point across with that. I'm not complaining about it. Just wanted to make sure I get my point across. Matt says, I like the energy of Jason in the remake and even some of the kills, but I wouldn't count it as one of the bottom 3. No, it's definitely not the worst. Definitely not the worst at all. Could have been better. There could have been some tweaks to make it better, but it's definitely not the worst. What is my favorite Friday the 13th film? Part 4. How could I not like tits everywhere? I mean, like I said, Elizabeth, like I don't view Friday the 13th as porn with kills. Like, it's just not that. Like, there's a specific formula that goes into making a tone of a Friday the 13th movie. And the remake definitely missed the boat on that. Do you think Jason has a middle name? I think if he does, it'd probably be like Joseph or something. Because wasn't that what they were originally? Oh, Josh. Probably be Joshua or something like that. Like how Matt has his name. Because Josh was the original name of Jason. So they'd probably incorporate that. Nick says, I heard that the sheriff that got the hammer to the skull was supposed to have more blood to it. Maybe. Andy got slit in half. That's the guy that was doing the handstand in part 3, right? Where Jason just kind of like burrowed down on him. Stanley likes it. I bet Stanley would, Ty. I bet many Stanleys like him. In that regard, yeah. I mean, I can definitely see it. But I kind of find it weird that part 5 gets a lot of flack for being the sleaziest Friday the 13th movie because it was done by a porn director. But somehow the 2009 movie gets a pass on that. And 2009 was far raunchier than part 5. Ranger says, my friend likes Jason X. I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking the movies at all. Like, Jason X is fun. Like, I did all the commentaries. It was a fun movie to watch. All of the movies are fun to watch. Jason Goes to Hell, Freddy vs. Jason, which I did twice on the channel. Jason X, they're all fun movies. But when you start looking at a sense of canon and how it pertains to storyline, then that's where it definitely falls apart. Because nothing in the New Line films makes sense pertaining to the Paramount ones. None of the history, none of some of the characters they introduce, nothing. But I mean, if you take the narrative out of it, and you look at Jason Goes to Hell, Freddy vs. Jason, and Jason X as all standalone movies, standalone stories that involve this character that don't have any connection to anything else, then yeah, they're fun. They're fun as shit. Ansley says, if Elias was not Jason's real father, then how would the final Friday play out? Ultimately, that was something that was weird too. With because I'm assuming you're talking about Jason Goes to Hell, because it assumes that okay, only through a Voorhees may he be born, and only through a Voorhees may he be reborn, and only at the hands of a Voorhees may he die. That was the line said by Creighton Duke in Jason Goes to Hell. I do dispute that, because there is evidence against that, because Jason's sister shoots Jason in the head while possessing the body of the one cop. Jason didn't die, but yet he was shot and killed by a Voorhees that should have killed him. She didn't shoot him in the heart, but that was never stated, that you have to shoot them or kill them by stabbing them in the heart. Nor was it said until the end that you need a specialized fucking Voorhees dagger to kill Jason as well. But also, we have to think that, okay, Jason would have had to have had a half-sister. That means Elias would have had to live a little bit after Jason drowned, maybe a long time after, depending on where you place Jason Goes to Hell in the year, which Adam Marcus places it in the year it was released in, like 1992, 1993. So that fucks the entire timeline in itself. But if we look at Jason's sister, yeah, she's older, but she doesn't look the age that she's supposed to be. And we never see her actual age mentioned. So we can safely assume that, okay, we can give that the benefit of the doubt. But at what point was she born if most other media that we're told is that Pamela killed Elias? I mean, this goes from books to comics as well. As if we're taking everything canon, which a lot of people like to do, because that's what I hear a lot, especially in regards to the New Line ones, that if, you know, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash is canon, that's why he's a Deadite and so forth like that. Well, if that's the case, then there are comic books that indicate that Pamela killed Elias. So if that's the case, when did Elias have Jason's sister? Like, when did that happen? Ty says, what if they filmed Friday the 13th, Part 13 in a 1970s grindhouse look? I would love that. I would love that gritty kind of look for it. Anthony says, Jason should go after Tommy's grandchildren. I mean, but why though? Like, his whole thing was never going after the Jarvis family. His whole purpose was something completely different. So, I mean, if the Jarvis grandchildren came across him and ultimately came across his path, then sure. But him actively seeking him out, I wouldn't really care for that. Matt says, I completely agree. They had so many chances that could have made it better. By the way, Final Chapter is my favorite too. Nice, Matt. Nice. Nick says, I wish they would bring out a director's cut to all of the OG Friday the 13th movies with nothing taken out. Sadly, we can't get that with Part 7 because, as they said, most of their footage was destroyed when they blew up the house. But that would have been one I would have wanted to see, the director's cut of Part 7, because from what I heard, they had so much stuff on the cutting room floor, and it was so heavily censored that it kind of got screwed by the MPAA. I heard Part 5 did too, and Part 6 to a degree. I think Part 6, as clean as Part 6 is, I would have probably loved to have seen a director's cut to that, to see what Tom McLaughlin, I'm about to say Matt, Tom McLaughlin originally had in there. What's going on, Skater Girl? Welcome back. How you doing? Ty says that's one of the reasons why I like my idea. Elias is the physical embodiment of Malpheus in Christian theology. He is the Prince of Hell. See, I mean, I don't mind that to a degree because it does play on specific superstitions that when your baby is deformed, especially back in the 1800s, 1700s, if your baby was deformed, that was touched by the devil, and so to speak, like that. I can see it in that sense, but the whole thing is that kind of seems to indicate that Jason is inherently evil from the beginning, and I never saw Jason as evil. I saw Jason as just a boy who loved his mother to no end, and because of that, and the threat of possibly having these outsiders rip him away from his mother, he preemptively attacked, especially when the deputy came to his shack. I mean, he killed Crazy Ralph, but we can assume that Crazy Ralph probably went to his shack too, and probably earned his death in Jason's eyes for that. But once the deputy came, and then Jason is spotting the other two, Sandra and her boyfriend, if he spots those two, he's probably thinking these people are getting closer and closer to my home, and they're going to take me away from my mother again. And he preemptively attacks. And when he gets resurrected in part 6, maybe he's not buried next to Pamela. Maybe they never moved Pamela's grave, which is odd enough that it's on the roadside going towards Crystal Lake, which is very weird. But maybe they never moved her grave close to Jason at all. And his whole purpose for coming back is still wanting to be reunited with Pamela. That sounds more like trying to be loved, with pretty much taking it to a supernatural realm with that, as opposed to being inherently evil and just killing to rack up the body count. But I do see how you're working that in, like I said, with the touched by the devil deformities and stuff like that. Matt says 2009 remake is just forgiven more by modern society because it's a more modern day movie, whereas part 5 is under more scrutiny. I agree. I definitely agree. Ansley says, do you think Chris went crazy, maybe like Crazy Ralph or something? Yes, I absolutely do. I think there's a possibility that Crazy Ralph may have survived something similar in Camp Crystal Lake and had same visions, maybe able to, which is probably why they are the way they are. Tyrone, welcome. So you got a baby turtle. Nice. Y'all name it after a Ninja Turtle. That's a complete missed opportunity. I'm completely joking. You don't have to. Ranger said you're old, dude. Tyrone, wonder what happened to Reggie the Reckless in the series. I wonder too, because I know for a while a lot of people theorized that he was Creighton Duke, but it doesn't match up with what we're told about Creighton Duke's history, and it wouldn't match up with why he's chasing after Jason, because Jason he never interacted with, so it never made any sense for that to be that. But I would be interested to see whatever happened to Reggie. And Pam, for that matter. Skater Girl says, doing good. Thank you very much. How are you doing? I'm doing great. I'm doing very well. Sitting here talking some Friday the 13th at the campgrounds. Enjoying myself. Hope you are doing a lot of the same while you're off the computer, whenever that happens. But while you're here, I want to say welcome and thank you for joining. Language Slayer, what religion are you? That I am not answering, because this is not a religious kind of thing. I don't talk politics, I don't talk religion, I don't talk any of that shit, because that's not what I'm here for, and it can start a issue within itself. We're here talking strictly horror movies, Friday the 13th in general. Religion, politics, that is for someone else for you to discuss with. That's not for here. Ranger says Crazy Ralph is Jason's real dad. Never know. That could possibly be. You never know. They could write that in tomorrow, and I'd be all for it to a degree. Harley says, I'm going to see you guys next time. I will see you next time as well, Harley. Tomorrow we will be doing the last 4 episodes, definitely, of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, commentaries for those. And then we will be doing the Fede Alvarez Evil Dead the next day. Then after that, we will be doing Dead by Daylight, and going into Saturday, we will be doing Man of Medan. That is the schedule for right now. But I hope to see you back for any of them. Outside of the Dead by Daylight ones, like, fucking feel free to join anytime. Tyrone said I didn't name the turtle yet. Once you name it, let me know, Tyrone. What's going on, Mrs. Gibbs? How you doing? Welcome. Hope your guys' stream over there was doing quite well. Stopped by a little bit while I was setting up my stream. Boss Chef says, I can't believe Jason killed Debbie, who was pregnant. I mean, he didn't know. It wasn't like she was 9 months showing or anything like that. I mean, do I think he would have killed her anyways? Yes, I do. Because I don't think Jason understood the concept of her being pregnant. No, I think if he would have stabbed her in the stomach and ultimately somehow revealed that she was pregnant, like the baby was almost full term at that point, I would have felt like Jason would have probably had some kind of would have had some feelings about that. I don't know if he would have just like moved on with that. Like, I think he would have kind of felt something, considering how he treats kids in general. Matt says, at the end of the day, Friday the 13th is a love story between a boy and his mother. You know, like Psycho. Exactly. Even Victor Miller said he turned that around. Where the original Friday the 13th was about pretty much a mother, a psychotic mother, and Psycho was about a psychotic son. Eventually, the psychotic son came in Friday the 13th, but it was ultimately supposed to be Psycho in reverse. I mean, she even talks for Jason in the first one, so it's definitely heavily influenced. That's what gets me when people start saying, well, Friday the 13th is a ripoff of Halloween. Yeah, in the sense that it takes a specific day of a calendar. Like Halloween took the holiday of Halloween. Friday the 13th took the day of Friday the 13th. That's where the similarities kind of end. Especially when you're just comparing the 2 first movies. Because sure, they both have killers. But if we're going just by that, then Halloween's a ripoff of Psycho. Halloween's a ripoff of Black Christmas. Halloween's a ripoff of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, we could go on and on and on. But it is, Friday the 13th is a ripoff in sense of the day. Using the day moniker as a gimmick. Now, what it really, really rips off is Psycho. It definitely rips off Psycho. Greatly. So, like, pretty much with that, where I get into a lot of conversations, well, Halloween's better, Friday the 13th, that's inferior because it's just a copy of Halloween. Like, it's not really. It's really not a remake of Halloween or ripoff of Halloween at all when it comes to the actual movie. Because the kill effects in Friday the 13th are much more gruesome and better. The acting, when you compare the two, very similar for that time. So I put them on par because Betsy Palmer and Donald Pleasance are the only real standouts in that movie. And yes, that includes Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis is on the same bar in that first movie of Halloween as Adrienne King is in Friday the 13th. They're on the same bar. So the only standouts in those movies is Dr. Loomis and Mrs. Voorhees. But I'm not going to start comparing. I may do that for another stream, comparing Halloween and Friday the 13th. Skater Girl says, thank you. Glad to be here. Love Friday the 13th game and films. Really, Skater Girl, what's your favorite film? What's your favorite film and what's your favorite look for Jason? Ranger says, Reggie and Vengeance, because in the police scene I heard somebody say Reggie. I mean, that always could happen. as far as like fan favor, but I mean, it's not exactly a canonized version to know where Reggie is. And I think if any fan film is going to ultimately become canon, it's likely Never Hike Alone. Well, that needs to be said, Vibe. Although I'm a big Palpatine fan. I love Palpatine. Nick says, I heard that Jason's dad was supposed to have been seen at the end of part 6. He was. That is correct. Elias Voorhees, as named by Tom McLaughlin, was supposed to be at the end of part 6, talking to the caretaker, because the caretaker was never supposed to die in the movie. Tyrone says, Crazy Ralph is Jason's daddy, and the old man from part 3 as his uncle would be weird, because why wouldn't they just tell on Pamela or Jason? Very true. Very true. I mean, I can kind of see Ralph, because if Ralph was already married at the time, even though he would have been far younger at the time of Jason's birth, then, or even engaged, then it would make sense that he had an affair with Pamela and ultimately would not want to reveal that. But I mean, as Crazy Ralph's personality is, I don't really see that being the case. I mean, nobody would believe him. Ansley says, how tall do you think Jason is? He appears to be taller, not including 2, 3, and 4. I'd say in 2, he appears to be at the tippy top, maybe about 6 feet, maybe at the most. Because he is smaller in part 2 than he is in all the other films. Once we get to like part 3 and 4, he's like 6'3", between 6'2" to 6'4", I would probably say. Then it only seems like he gets progressively taller as the films go on. Because part 6, he feels like he's like 6'5", 6'6". Then once we get to Freddy versus Jason, he's like 7'2", it feels like. But he was wearing those Frankenstein boots, too. That made him taller. Tyrone says, does Jason have telekinesis as well? If he can talk to his mom, or is it a symbiotic relationship? I think it's because a symbiotic relationship means that she's a part of him in some way. It could be telekinetic. It could also be her spirit following him to a degree. I don't think she's a part of him, but I think he can actually hear certain voices calling to him. I mean, it could be the loneliness that's providing the voices, or it could just be silence and loneliness overall that could be driving him, that he wants to be back. Supercat says, I have a love-hate relationship with Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham, as they made Jason in the movies, but they also fucked us with the lawsuit. I mean, yes and no, because, I mean, Victor only wrote the first movie. Sean directed the first movie, put his name on some of the other movies as producer, but ultimately had nothing to do with the movies after the first film. Thought that Jason being a killer in the second movie on was a dumb fucking idea. Didn't really get on board until he saw, hey, I can make money for this. His whole purpose of even joining with New Line and coming back to the series in some capacity was for more work opportunities, not because he liked the franchise and wanted to pioneer it into a new era. So, I mean, to be fair, Victor wants part of Friday the 13th because out of its legacy, he was only paid chump change. He got like $4,000 for everything that he contributed to kickstart the Friday the 13th franchise. Granted, he only wrote the first one, but that first one is the foundation of the rest of the series. Sean Cunningham, who made millions off Friday the 13th, can care fucking less if that movie was to die today or tomorrow, which is why he had no problem telling Gunn or Ilphonic, like, hey, shut down all content. I don't care how much money I'm missing on this shit. shut it down. I don't want to look bad in court, so I can get all my copyright back. When this could be completely fixed by creating a monetary deal with Victor, giving him a percentage more than what he's getting. Victor was getting $4,000 over the past 35 years of the film being in existence and carrying on, like, you know, characters based on Victor Miller. Like, that kind of really sucks. Victor definitely deserves a cut. It definitely deserves to make a much more lucrative deal with Horror Inc. So, I mean, I don't fault them at all, and I think that they're not necessarily, to a degree, they're kind of fucking us with the lawsuit, but not really. Because as fans, yeah, I want it, but that's a very selfish way to look at it. Because while we do want Friday the 13th films, we also got to think of those creators that are giving us the Friday the 13th films. And we got to thank them in some kind of way. They got to get their monetary check. I mean, Sean doesn't need it. He obviously doesn't need it because he's pretty much worked through. He's got merchandise. He's got the past Friday the 13th movies that he's made tons of money on, and so forth. Victor is just over here like, I just want a piece. That's it. I just want a piece of it. I'm not asking for a whole lot because he's not. I think now, out of spite, he's asking for maybe half, like a 50-50 kind of deal with Horror Inc. Which that I think is unfair because, yeah, he created Jason. He created Pamela. He created the story with Camp Crystal Lake and all that. But ultimately, Jason has evolved beyond that. I think he should be paid on a percentage based on how much of his stuff is used per film. Or just a flat rate. Give him like 15%. Or have him have a stake in the profits of the movie. And give him a producer credit. Like, that's all you really need. But it's not going to happen because both have such an axe to grind against the other. Ty says, what if Jason's dad is Emperor Palpatine? He would have unlimited power. Tyrone says, was Loomis of Halloween related to or is the Loomis of Psycho? Or is it just an in-joke like the name Chet and Mirage Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I went over this theory, and the thing is, I think they're different characters. They have to be different characters. Because the events of Psycho take place in, I believe, 1960, if I remember right. And Michael Myers kills his sister in 1963. Now, Loomis, we know, is not a child psychiatrist in the events of Psycho. Nowhere near it. So even if he did decide to become a child psychiatrist at the end of Psycho, he would have had to been fast-tracked because it takes a long time to get to that sense because of how delicate children's minds are. So there'd be no way that you could just fast-track going from dealing with a psychotic murderer like Norman Bates and then jumping to child psychiatrist 3 years later, depending on when he decided to go in. So I don't think that is to be the case. Not unless there was a lot of forgeries and a lot of fudging of paperwork, which could also work in a sense because, I mean, given Loomis's work with Michael, obviously he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. So, I mean, there could possibly be a possibility in there. Ranger says, did you get the creeps when you were working at the cemetery? No, not really. Not at all. Tyrone says, yeah, how does Jason grow when he's undead? That's a good question. That's a very good question. I mean, maybe his body is expanding. Maybe. His bones pulling apart. I mean, that wouldn't be a good answer, but it would be all I got for you right now. Tyrone also says, what would be your pitch if Savini Demon Jason was in a movie? Pretty much as his origin was supposed to be in the game. Like, he killed the devil and pretty much took over hell, so to speak, allowing himself to come back to the physical plane. The only question is, when you reach that level of power, who do you have beat him? Because you can't count on normal people doing that. There's no way. which is why I have always said eventually you have to move on from killers, because if you keep bringing them back and escalating their power more and more and more, eventually they're going to reach God tier. And because of that, when you have normal people that are stagnated in their abilities, it becomes no longer believable that someone down here can beat someone up here. That is ridiculous. Skater Girl says, I watched all the Friday the 13th. All were amazing. If I had to choose, the first and second were my fave. I like The Mask and Part 4, the final chapter. That's nice. I can go with that. Not bad choices. Nicholas says, will we get to know how Dr. Loomis died in the next 2 Halloween movies? I don't think there's going to be too much special. I mean, we'll probably know. We'll probably figure it out because there'll probably be more information that we get about Loomis in the next 2 Halloween movies. But I think ultimately it's going to be like he died of natural causes. Matt says it could be Jason and Pamela may have schizophrenia or just staying alone over a long period of time. People start believing they hear people. Very true. Very true. Especially with Jason being like that since a child. Like that kind of isolation for that long a period of time. And then to find your mother's body on the banks of a camp. He may have picked up the head and started instantly hearing voices from it. Like in his own mind, constructing the conversation. Tyrone says, I also wanted to know your characters for your Blumhouse pitch, like the final girl, the nerd, geek token, black kid, the jock, and the sluts, etc. I haven't gotten that far as naming them, just because it was kind of a concept that I wanted to go back to. If I do expand it, I will definitely outline everything, kills included, because I know that was one of the complaints I got about my nightmare. Some of my story concepts with my nightmare one wasn't in my Evil Dead one, because my Evil Dead one I did get into detail too with the deaths. But if I do the Blumhouse pitch again, I'm likely going to break down all the character names and how they die, as well as their roles in the movie. Anthony says, why Jason was running from the cop in Friday the 13th Part 2? Because he was spotted. He was spotted and he's been hidden for this long. And he knows he's killed someone already. He's killed 2 people at that point. So, I mean, his first inclination is to run. Like, it wasn't exactly like he was going to hunt down the cop as soon as he pulled up. Tyrone says Sean Cunningham should be the producer while Victor should be paid for using his stuff he created. Very true. Very true. I think both of them should get producer credits, as well as Victor getting paid for his credit as having his name on the credits itself, like, you know, based on characters created by Victor Miller. He should definitely get paid for that. Ty says, Sam Loomis in Psycho is the son of Dr. Sam Lewis. That's my theory. I mean, who would Sam Lewis be, though? Like, his name's not ringing a bell. You'd have to enlighten me on that, Ty. Vibe says, any final girl sees the victim of the killer. The final girl, it's treason. Ranger says, Jason Nips. I mean, I thought about bringing him out. But I'm kind of saving him. I'm holding on to him for a rainy day. Especially if for some reason Jason does get announced as the next killer at Dead by Daylight. You're hearing it here now. The Jason Nips are going on. They're being installed. And we're playing Dead by Daylight. Jason Nips out. Devin. You were supposed to destroy the mainstream, not join them. Bring balance to the horror community, not leave it in light. Well, I am in darkness. I got Dark in my name. Plague says, do you think the next killer in Dead by Daylight is Jason, and can there be 2 licensed killers? You mean 2 licensed killers at once? Highly unlikely, because they split their profits. You're not going to see that. Because some people are going to be having to choose, like, well, do I get this or do I get that? They'll eventually get both, but you don't maximize profit like that. We'll probably get 2 licenses before the year is out, because I think we're going to get this license, and I think we're going to get Candyman later on, closer to his release date. Could be 2 licenses back to back, but I'm thinking that's likely what's going to happen. Oh, thank you for the super chat, Tyrone. I greatly appreciate it, my friend. So you got to do readings like the rare comic books, like by the rare comic books, like Comic Storian. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing something like that. But I mean, what rare comics would you want? And why did my alert not go off for that? That's odd. Because I mean, I could do some of the Friday the 13th readings along with because I'm still doing the fucking reading for Dracula and stuff like that, like some of the books that I have on my bookshelf. I wouldn't mind doing readings for it, but doing comic book readings, I never really thought of that, or at least like took it seriously enough to actually do it. But you're piquing my interest, Tyrone. You're definitely piquing my interest. I have to look into that. I wouldn't know anything about that, Ty. Hey, what's going on, Play? How you doing? Is JG Dark next killer in Dead by Daylight? I would love to be. You imagine me like fucking running around with the bandana on, chasing people? Hey, what's going on, Chuck? How you doing? Sorry you're late. Oh, no worries, no worries, no worries. We're still talking. Hanging out, talking. Wizard of Oz reference, Devin. Milk from the Jason Nips. Of course, we gotta get the milk from the Jason Nips. There'd be no other way. I mean, it's like fucking 1% body fat. Alive by midnight. You would blind people, players with your baldness. Just like, that's the ability. That's the ability there. Just take it off, let it shine. Flashlight the fuck out of survivors with it instead. Wouldn't that be turnabout for fair play? Hey, what's going on, Diana M? How you, N? Like, do I not know my letters? Diana N. What is going on? Welcome to the stream, and I'm glad I can give you a proper welcome. JG's Mori is that he tie him out by snapping his fingers. Pretty much. Give me the Thanos snap. Like, time out. Tyrone says, does the Nightmare on Elm Street comics that explains Freddy's backstory contradict Freddy versus Jason versus Ash? Nightmare Warriors with Maggie's fate. The Nightmare on Elm Street comics, when they came out around the same time that the Friday the 13th comics came out, I actually did not have a chance to pick those up because they were sold out all the time when I went in there to get them. I had my Friday the 13th ones pre-ordered, so I was able to get those, but I was never able to get the Nightmare on Elm Street ones. So if I do those, I do have to read them, just because I don't know much about the stories that take place in them. Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, I do have all of those. I do know the story in those, although it has been a long time since I read them. But I need to get digital copies of all of them anyway, especially if I want to do anything similar to what Comic Storian does. I need the digital copies of them before I do any of that. Nia, I mean the entity, chose you. I feel so glad to be chosen. Hey, I know my alphabet. Not really, clearly. My theory on your initials are Jason Gray or Jason Gary Dark. Not Gary, no. Close to it. It's Gray. Dark Gray. I mean, I imagine I'll eventually get around to checking those out, Ty. I mean, I still haven't really had a chance to check out all of the Friday the 13th, the series. I checked out a couple episodes here and there, but trying to check out everything, it's, especially when you have access to as much as I do, like it's very hard to watch all of that, especially with Indiana Jones, because I like Indiana Jones, but I'm not like a mega fan of it. So, I mean, I remember bits and pieces, but I'm not kind of going out of my way to consume all of the iterations of the franchise or all installments. But, I mean, I'll eventually get around to checking it out. Brenda says, by the way, why did you spell Dark wrong? I explained this before. I don't think Brenda was here when I did. The way I spelled Dark in my name is ultimately a marketing thing. Because before I created my YouTube channel, I used JG Dark as spelled as D-A-R-K on a other game that I played. I think it was like DC Universe. So I wanted to translate that over to YouTube because I thought, that's a good name, whatever. So then I did a spell check on YouTube to see what other channels have that same name. And believe it or not, there's a couple of hits on there. And I didn't want my channel to be buried by just simply the name spelling. So I looked at alternate spellings of the name. And at the time, I was watching Arrow. Arrow's main villain at the time was Damien Dark, who spells it the exact same way I do. So I was like, okay, let me try that. Let me see how that works. Did a search, got the results. I was the only channel. So I was like, you know what? There you go. That's it. That's the name. Like, I think you can still type it in now, and I'm like one of the only results. If not, you don't get a bunch of hits on my videos. But that's ultimately the reason why. It's more so marketing and branding. Dead Corp says, I prefer the idea of Jason becoming strong and immortal due to the death curse, resurrecting him shortly after drowning rather than the dumb Deadite stuff. I agree. I definitely agree. Although I would probably place the death curse on him at the time of his death to Tommy, but I could deal with it with death curse resurrecting him at the time of his drowning too. But for me, it would make more sense at the time of his death with Tommy, just because of the anger, the loneliness, and being ripped away from his mother. All kind of culminates within that death curse, especially if you read Badlands. What's going on, the Metal Redneck? How you doing? Have you seen the documentary how New Line Cinema killed Friday the 13th? I have. Isn't that I believe it's off the one YouTube channel, Horror is Dead, where he talks about the Rob Zombie Halloween's found footage, which I kind of disagree with him on found footage, just because I do like found footage movies, but ultimately that's opinion. And his take on Friday the 13th. I did also see one of his other videos where he hated the whole aspect of Halloween 2018 and so forth like that. I forgot, I didn't get his opinion on H2O, because I know he hated the whole timeline reboot, and I didn't get his opinion on H2O, considering H2O is a reboot. And still, from what I understand, Jason Goes to Hell is a reboot too. So I mean, there's not like Halloween 2018 is the first of its kind, but there's a couple things in there that are very interesting as far as facts. Of course, I did do some digging myself because I don't take anything at face value on the internet. So I did some of the claims. I did research some of them and found some of them to be true, very much so, and ran with them as fact because of my own fact checking. Could be still wrong. There's always a chance of that. But I definitely recommend for people to check it out and judge for yourself. Okay, Tyrone says, so I'm guessing you never read the Child's Play comics either, and we see Dr. Death, John Bishop's Fate, Mrs. Barkley, and Sheriff Mike. I have not read the Child's Play comics. Because, I mean, what did they say happened with Mrs. Barkley and Sheriff Mike? Because I'm assuming if they're canon to the new movie, or the latest movie, not the one with Cult of Chucky I'm talking about. I'm assuming if they're canon to that, then she's still alive. And doesn't it indicate that Mike Norris does marry Andy's mother? If I remember right? Or that could have been something that was said to me, and I just ran with it. Where does it say in the script that Halloween Water is a reboot, Ty? It's pretty much the way you look at the series. Because I discussed this with Anthony. We have Marion Crane. Now, unless we... Now, I know this is a Friday the 13th stream, but we're going to dive into some Halloween here real quick to really illustrate why Halloween H2O is not connected to the original series. Now, let's look at the beginning. Now, the beginning we do get a sort of callback to Halloween 6 because Michael Myers does wear the Halloween 6 mask for a brief moment, but does change quickly after the scene. But let's look at it. Marion Crane was apparently Dr. Loomis's caretaker in the part of Illinois that the movie picks up at. That's where she took care of Loomis. So where was Loomis living in the events of Halloween 6? Because I got the impression that he was living in Haddonfield. Okay, let's go beyond that. Where was Marion Crane, his caretaker, when Loomis went on his misadventure in Halloween 6? Okay, maybe she was on vacation, maybe. There would have probably been another caretaker for someone of that age and injuries, but let's move on. Now, they say Loomis died a couple years back. Now, we know from that movie that it is very much associated at the end of Halloween 6 that Loomis was killed by Michael. Because we see the mask there, Loomis goes back to the hospital, we hear him screaming. We know in the producer's cut, he gets the Curse of Thorn. That isn't canon to anything else. But Loomis dies in Haddonfield. Now, let's look at all of the history in Haddonfield. For this place to be as close to Haddonfield as it's supposed to be. And then we're going to get to the conversation between the two detectives. Now, Halloween 4, Michael wakes up after a 10-year coma, kills the entire police force of Haddonfield, gets gunned down by a mob, comes back the next year, kills a bunch more cops, gets arrested, breaks out of prison, isn't seen for a few years, comes back in part 6, kills even more people in the Myers house, have you? Goes to a hospital where multiple people are killed by Michael, and they would have surveillance footage of Michael Myers killing these people, or even someone dressed as Michael. But they would also have record of Michael doing the things in part 4 and 5. Okay, we got all of that covered. Why is it in H2O that when the two detectives are talking, and they're talking about Michael Myers and the possibility of Marion Crane getting killed by Michael, they only bring up the events of part 1 and 2. Like, his body was never found after being burned. But they make reference to his age. But the thing is, why make reference to him being so old, even though he would have been in his 40s at the time? Why make reference to him being so old when Halloween 6 and all of that would have been, taken place 3 years ago? Prior to that? Like, he would have been still actively able, and his body count would have been so high that most of those detectives aren't making a joke about it. But if we go beyond that, and then we go to the horror historian of Halloween Resurrection, he only mentions the events in Michael's body count from part 1 and 2. Then he goes missing, returns to Hillcrest Academy, kills all of those people, and now he's back. He doesn't mention anything of part 4, 5, or 6, even though the events of 4 and 5 should be extremely high profile for someone even like him to know about, especially if he's already heard of the Hillcrest Academy murders. And then there's the very, very, very weird stance that Laurie decided to give up Jamie, fake her accident, fake a car crash, fake her death, and was all this time worried about Michael resurfacing and worried about her son John. But fuck Jamie. That kind of paints Laurie Strode as a really shitty person that should be killed by Michael. And even when she's talking to her boyfriend in H2O, she brings up the events of part 1 and 2. Never mentions about having a daughter and giving her up for adoption, but mentions about faking her death. That would be kind of, if you're airing things, my brother is this iconic psychotic serial killer, but not mentioning the daughter that you gave up for adoption and ultimately was killed by this psychopath a few years back. The lack of information is either the police are inept and no one's keeping record of anything that Michael does, or it's not canon. And Laurie Strode is the police are inept. Laurie Strode is also a terrible person, and she should not be rooted for at all if that's to be your hero. At least in my opinion, the everything leading up from 4, 5, and 6, and then everything we're told in H2O and Resurrection, and the lack of acknowledgement to the events of 4, 5, and 6 definitely indicate that pretty much those movies are no longer canon. Then there's the production standpoint that we know that Jamie Lee Curtis absolutely wanted nothing to do with any of the movies of 4, 5, and 6. And she refused to do the movies with any connection to them. Because originally, the original script, if I remember right, did call for those movies to be connected. But she was the one that took the stance that this is a reboot. What if witness protection? Sure, she can't talk about her daughter. I mean, if she can't talk about her daughter, then why is she able to bring up everything else? Why is she able to bring up Michael Myers being her brother? Like, it kind of goes hand in hand. Like, I can see why Jamie's foster parents weren't able to talk about Lori. That makes sense. But if Lori's spilling all of this information to her boyfriend, or the fact that Lori is so distraught every time Halloween comes around is because she heard of everything happening in Haddonfield in Halloween 4, 5, and 6, and her daughter being killed, that would add some credence to that. But the fact that she cares no fucks if Jamie existed, that really plays up on that if you were to keep that canon. But we know that it's not. We know that everything is not like that in H2O and Resurrection. Even when we go to Halloween Resurrection and fucking we go to the Dangertainment stuff and a lot of the stuff that they build up into Resurrection, it seems like nobody's heard or seen from Michael Myers in Haddonfield since the events of Halloween 2. But yet he's been living in the tunnels of Haddonfield for years, apparently, which is another odd thing. Like, she could have easily lied to her boyfriend, but she had a daughter because she didn't want her boyfriend to think she was scum of the earth. But I mean, that kind of demeans the point of her even telling him anything to begin with. Because, I mean, the whole point of her even telling him was to not scare, was to come clean. Because she was scared she was going to scare him off. And telling him all of that. And then not telling John any of it. John knew nothing of fucking about it. And like just the lack of acknowledgement of she's telling him like, yeah, you know, my brother killed my sister with a big butcher knife. Then he came after me and his body was never found. So I faked my death and I went into hiding. And it's like, well, why are you still scared if it's been 20 years? It would have been really good if you wanted to try to connect everything. That even if she didn't want to acknowledge Jamie as her daughter, like, yeah, someone I knew was killed by him just a few years ago. Because you can't tell me someone that obsessed with Michael Myers since 1978 has not been keeping tabs on anything happening in Haddonfield, especially with Dr. Loomis. There's no possible way that she doesn't know that. And then it still goes to Resurrection, where we have the guy, the clown, who knows everything about Michael Myers and various other serial killers. Now, you can argue maybe he was not in know of everything that happened in 4, 5, and 6. How the fuck did he get the knowledge to Hillcrest? If that was the case. Because, I mean, killing a couple kids at the Hillcrest Academy pales in comparison to killing an entire police force in one night on Halloween, on the 10th year anniversary of Michael Myers' initial 1978 murders. Let me go back real quick. Tyrone says, spoiler alert, Mrs. Barkley was in mental asylum. Chucky contradicts part 3 being reborn. Some horror movie memorabilia goth kids pick Chuck up. Okay. That's in the comic, Tyrone? Like reading everything? What's going on, Random Aussie? How you doing? Michael certainly learned a lot in the asylum, like learning to drive. Definitely so. Which I believe Nick Castle actually made a joke on. A Freddy Krueger teddy bear. Devin says, let's talk about Friday the 13th, and we're talking about Halloween. I did warn that we were going into Halloween real quick, Devin. Oh shit. Metal Redneck says, "Hey Dark, do you ever watch Monster Madness on Cinemassacre?" Every year. Every year I watch it. Anthony says, "I prefer Jamie over Lori." Jamie was definitely more sympathetic than Lori. I agree. I agree with that. I don't know, like, if with the way she's portrayed in Halloween H2O tie, where once Halloween comes around, she becomes psychotically obsessed and wanting to keep John safe. I would be inclined to agree with you if it was the whole thing like, don't mention his name in my presence, don't do this, don't do that, fucking live it like he never existed, and so forth like that. But someone like Lori seems to indicate to me that she would ultimately have at least heard on the news, because killing an entire police force is newsworthy when a psychotic serial killer who has been in a coma for 10 years suddenly escapes and kills a bunch of people. It would have been on the news. She would have heard something about it, especially John. John would have heard something about it, knowing that his mother is the sister to Michael Myers. So, like, he would have heard something about it too, to help validate whether he was having to do all of this shit or not. So, I mean, it's kind of like, one way or another, word of mouth would have reached them. Because, I mean, if you get a psychotic person that kills this entire town's police force, you're definitely going to hear about it. That's going to be in every tabloid that you could possibly get your hands on. And still, it still goes to Jamie. Her acknowledgement of Jamie. Because, I mean, even medical records would have showed that she would have had some kind of connection with Jamie. But, I mean, I can see to a sense that if you wanted to connect them, the connective tissue would have to be placed in order for that to happen. But for all intents and purposes, the way the movies of H2O and Resurrection are structured, it's definitely a reboot. It's definitely one. Same thing with Jason Goes to Hell. Jason Goes to Hell is definitely a reboot. With how Adam Marcus was told to write and direct Jason Goes to Hell, being completely ignoring part 8, but you can't ignore part 8 without ignoring part 7. You can't ignore part 7 without ignoring part 6, and so forth like that. It's sort of a thread. You can't ignore one without the other without a proper explanation. Who's the stealthiest killer at stalking, Michael or Jason? I would have to go with Michael as far as stealth. Jason is stealthy, but Michael is extremely ninja-like. And Michael knows how to use the shadows to his advantage. Jason, he's more hide around the corner, sneak up behind you kind of thing. Like, he's a weird kind of stealthiness that is where he can sneak up to you on broad daylight kind of deal. Michael definitely is like Bane. Like, I'm born in it. Like shadows, I was molded by it. How bad is Jason's body odor? Probably bad. Prior to death and after. Because you imagine Jason, I don't see Jason as being a bathing type person. And even if he did, he probably bathed in the lake and never saw like a bar of soap in his life. Devis says, I never thought of H2O as a sequel, more like a Halloween 2018 reboot. It just acknowledges the first two films. Exactly. That is the intention of H2O. The first timeline was supposed to be 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. The second timeline was 1, 2, H2O, and Resurrection. And now we have this third timeline, Halloween 1 and Halloween 2018. Jason was just fumbling and stumbling in part 2, especially as the mistake with him standing on the chair and the chair legs breaking and then falling over. That was fucking hilarious. What's going on, Thomas Gamici? How you doing? Hello from Italy. How is it over there? How you doing? Hopefully all is well. What kill has Jason not done yet that you would like to see? I think something along the lines of a mallet smash against a table, like holding someone's head down and taking a mallet and smashing it against the head, completely exploding the skull. I mean, that would be gruesome. Some would say over the top, but I think it kind of does what Michael did in 2018 off screen, where he smashes the one girl in the head that's in the house with the baby with the hammer. But this time you actually see it and like actually smashes the skull open. That was the first thing that came to mind, though. Yeah, very true, Random Mossy. Jason was fumbling and stumbling, but only with Jenny. I mean, to be fair, though, who wouldn't be fumbling and stumbling with Jenny? Do I think Jason could kill somebody with his body odor? I mean, it could, depending on how weak their stomach is. Because, I mean, inducing vomit and shit like that can definitely have some adverse effects. Why hasn't Jason used the chainsaw yet? That's what I want to know. I mean, he did technically use a saw, just not a chainsaw, because he did use that buzzsaw in Part 7 on Dr. Cruz. But as far as the chainsaw, it's weird that he hasn't used a chainsaw yet. That is true. I mean, maybe just the opportunity never arose. Because, I mean, Jenny had a chainsaw in Part 2. Jason was scared to death of. Pam had one in Part 5, but that wasn't Jason, and Roy was scared to death of. I mean, it just had to be an opportunity, I guess. Halloween is like the Fox X-Men timelines. Very true. But at least with the Halloween timelines, they attempted to keep everything in continuity at the beginning. I mean, granted, Part 3 was part of its anthology series, so I guess I kind of broke away from that. But then once you get to Part 4, 5, and 6, they tried to keep all of that in. But then Part 6 was so hindered by the events of Part 5 that they had to reboot it with H2O, and then they tried to keep that in continuity with Resurrection, and then Resurrection was saw as such a step back from H2O at the time that they eventually just moved on to the remakes, and then Rob Zombie completely fucked that over with H2. And then we got Halloween 2018, which took us back to the original film, which took us back to square one and is now rewriting the history. Well, not the history, because the history is still kind of remaining the same until Halloween Kills and we get the flashbacks. Then it may rewrite some history. But as far as like the continuity itself, it's trying to keep itself in a serious tone to keep Michael as this random force of nature. Where the X-Men movies were like, okay, this is our continuity. No, you know what? This is now our continuity. And it's like movies that came out the same year. Ty says, in my script, I would have seen where Jason kills somebody with a dildo he punched through their throat. I mean, that would be interesting. You're from the state of Tuscany. Oh, nice, nice, nice. I've never been over there, so I have no idea where that is. I mean, I assume it's nice over there. Tyrone says Art the Clown is disgusting. He goes for the genitals and bodily fluids, such as Doki. Dookie. Yep, I seen that. I seen that in his last film. Well, I mean, if you go by my one Halloween theory, Tyrone, where I had it where the events of Halloween 3 take place after Halloween 2. And because of Cochrane succeeding in his sacrifices for what he wanted to do with Silver Shamrock, it gave the Cult of Thorn magic that they didn't have prior. Like, they were all in this cult for a reason, and now, based on their ancient teachings of the cult, they now have magic. So knowing and recognizing what Michael did prior, and that even though he was burned at the end of part 2, he still survived, they saw him as something more than just a man. So they ended up placing their Cult of Thorn on him, the Mark of Thorn, I should say. And my mic is muted, really? Can you hear me? I mean, I see my mic levels are jumping as normal. I don't know if it's muted. Unless you're talking about when I wasn't saying anything there for a second. Okay, you can hear me. But yeah, like going back on my thing where pretty much they put the Mark of Thorn on Michael, and the Mark of Thorn is used to control Michael, but ultimately he's still evil incarnate. Like, he's still his psychotic murdering self. But pretty much the Cult of Thorn is controlling him for their own means. And pretty much as we see in Halloween 6, it involves Jamie, the baby, and so forth like that. And ultimately, Michael does break free, which is why he kills all of the Thorn cultists, doctors, in part 6. He's free from his bonds, but he's still drawn to the baby just because, you know, there's probably some residual magic still stuck in there. Chuck says, my favorite Jason is Richard Brooker in part 3 because Richard Brooker portrays Jason as an angry, killing linebacker. I can agree with that. I do like that. Anthony says, oh shit, where did that go? Oh, there we go. Anthony says the fans were upset because Michael wasn't in part 3. He was in a trailer for Halloween 3. Not for Halloween 3, but for Halloween 1. It treated Halloween 1 like a movie. But he was in there in that sense. But honestly, Halloween 3 didn't need Michael. The story didn't pertain to him at all. And Halloween 3 is greatly underrated. Greatly. It's a good story. Good story. Good score. Good story. Very unique, and I personally like it. Tyrone says Richard Brooker's Jason was ruthless. I agree with that. Not sure, Masseuse. You may have to refresh your browser if you can hear me. Dead Corpse said, do you think Roy Burns was part of the cult of Thorn? I mean, he certainly had the Michael Myers outfit for it. No, I think Roy was likely controlled by the death curse in some formal way. Not controlled, but he was probably driven to madness with it. Same with Pamela, same with Jason. All right, guys. I think that's going to do it for me for the day. I am sort of getting a sore throat. I'm going to need another drink after this shit. But definitely going to hop on, probably go to grab me some food. Probably be on tomorrow. Well, I will be on tomorrow. We'll be doing some Ash versus the Evil Dead commentaries for the last 4 episodes, which I've been meaning to get to. And then, like I said, Thursday will be Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead commentary, and that will finish all of the Evil Dead series. We are done with Evil Dead, and then we will start looking forward to the future, to the next movies we will be doing commentaries for. Friday will be Dead by Daylight Day. Saturday, we will be back on Man of Medan. Unless, I do a poll, and you guys rather Dead by Daylight. But that's the schedule for now. That's what I'm trying to stick by. And try to stick to it as best as we can. You never know. Things could change. Maybe for some reason I'm just not into Man of Medan and I decide to play Dead by Daylight, or vice versa. Maybe a different game. But yeah, I will definitely see you guys if you want to join me tomorrow for the commentaries. Again, that will work is... if you guys have your copies of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, we're on season 3, the last 4 episodes. I believe starting on episode 6, I think it is. 6 through 10, that's what we're doing. And the way it will work is if you have your copies ready, we will sync up our copies. I will give a countdown to sync up, and then we'll watch the movie together. Hopefully when I make mention of something on screen, it should match up with yours. Or if you come back and want to watch it at a later time, feel free to do so, and you can do it at any time you want. But yeah, I'm going to head out. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And as always, I am JG Darhk. And thanks for watching.
As a hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in bloody sheets to drop you 6 feet underneath. They put you in a pine wood box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. It all goes well for about a week, and then your coffin begins to leak, and the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose as you begin to decompose. A slimy beetle with demon's eyes chews through your stomach and out your sides. Your stomach turns to rancid grease, and pus pours out like melted cheese. You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you'll eat when you're dead. And the worms crawl out, the worms crawl in. The worms that crawl in are lean and thin. The ones that crawl out are fat and stout. Your eyes fall in and your hair falls out. Your brain turns into maggot pie. Your liver starts to liquefy. And for the living all is well as you sink further into hell. And the flames rise up to drag you down into the fire where you will drown. Your skin melts off as you descend, and Satan tears you limb from limb. Your suffering will never end. And the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They'll eat your guts and then shit them out. And when you're goes by, for someday you'll be the one to die. And when death brings his cold despair, ask yourself, will anyone